Hello, good morning, welcome. I am Samuel Trapp. This is International Flavor. You are listening to Damn Radio. Hopefully you do so every day at damnradio.com/live, or you perhaps go out to damnradio.com/podcast and listen to all these hilarious moments later in the privacy of your own sitting room. That's always a possibility. You can go out there and do it. And if you just want international flavor, you can go out to internationalflavor.com. So, we used to make these jokes. Actually, I might have been the only one doing it because, I don't know, maybe I. There's no we here. It's probably just me. There was a guy who was, so Jefferson City I've always seen as a very small town. You know, everybody knows everybody. Everybody's sleeping with everybody. You know, it's the worst part. And I always used to make jokes about a certain judge in town who I would say, you know, you're never more than several places removed from sleeping with the person who slept with the person that slept with the person that slept with Judge so-and-so. And you know, that's how that is how the horror story goes. And so I read an interesting article last night. Couldn't help but thinking about that. I think I'm going to share it with you. But we're going to go through some headlines. And that title is how many. They were much more reasonable, I'd say, much less crass and crude than Samuel in his post-army days. Well, maybe even today, I don't know. Maybe I'm still crass and crude. How many handshakes away from Epstein are you? How many people, and I think he's probably the better example. You know, he slept with so-and-so. So-and-so slept with so-and-so, who slept with so-and-so, who slept with so-and-so. That you slept with. How many sexual interchanges are you away from this person? That's a horrible thing to say about people, but, well, if you know the dirty laundry, well, you can calculate that number. And the further removed you are, the less chance it is that you will be diseased. So this is the Clinton debacle there, right? How far away do you gotta be so to be I don't know, to be immune from treatment? So if you we're we're in the same bed. Well, you got problems. What? I didn't touch that person. We just happened to be in the same bed. I was on the aircraft, but I did not have sexual relations with that woman, right? You can always say something like that, and people will believe you. You know, I mean, I believed for the longest time that Bill was the victim of Republican propagandists and Republican propaganda artistes. Isn't that terrible? That's just how it goes. Anyway, the story is, how many handshakes from Epstein are you? It's an opinion piece. I like it. I will probably share it with you. The U.S. has accused the EU of censorship again. There's a story about whether or not Epstein was a Mossad spy. And I've talked about this before, but now it has come back around. While the West fixates on Ukraine, Russia and India are building a new global system. That's an interesting story and a very good piece. I wanted to get, before we got into the news of the day as it is, we started our advertising efforts, our social media platform. I encourage you to go out and check out what we are doing at Civic Outlaws. I encourage you to become a civic warrior. Go out and check out some of the movements of against government overreach, basically, as to put it mildly, to put it nicely. You know, we wish to limit government overreach, attack government overreach, go after the world-class bureaucrat. It's I wrote an article yesterday, which I may share with you. It's going to be shared anyway, and I at the end of today's show, I might share it with you, and it has to do with the impetus behind it, behind Civic Outlaws, and it's important to keep track of this. I like I've said a couple of times before, I believe that Donald Trump has had a good effect on making it okay at present. None of us believe in the government anymore, as the government is the savior, is the way to, in fact, most of us believe that, and rightly so, that the government can't answer even simple questions, let alone deal with major ones, On the international level, it's a shit show, pardon my French. And in our country anyway, a lot of times in the nonsense that we're watching, still don't have a realistic budget, no way to do anything, and constant inbred fighting. You're never more than a prophylactic away from somebody who slept with somebody who slept with somebody who slept with somebody. That's on the state capitol. It's nonsense, especially if you live in Jeff City. And so on the local level and the national level, it's a cesspool in Washington, D.C. And, these are career bureaucrats that control the planet. And it's depressing to me because that isn't the intent of the democratic form of government. And what we have done in the world, creating so-called democracy everywhere. And I say we again. I know I'll get beat up for that. But the West and America, we all play our part because none of us seem to be able to do a whole hell of a lot about it. Whichever way the pendulum swings, it's us getting the shaft in the middle. It's the normal American taking the beating down below. I'd like to see some positive things come up. I can't tell you how many stories I want to get into. I suppose I better get into the biggest news. This Ryan Wesley Ruth stalked the president. Basically, U.S. federal court has sentenced him to life in prison for attempting to assassinate the old Trumpster at his Florida golf resort in 2024. Prosecutors say that Ruth, who is reportedly obsessed with the Ukraine conflict, stalked the then presidential candidate armed with the rifle. U.S. District Court Judge Eileen Cannon in Fort Pierce, Florida, imposed a sentence of life plus 84 months. I assume that means his dead body's got to stay in the cell for 84 more months after he serves his entire life, then 84 months, following Ruth's conviction by a federal jury on all 5 counts in the indictment. The Justice Department said on Wednesday. The charges include attempted assassination of a major presidential candidate, assault on a federal officer, and multiple firearms offenses. Ryan Ruth's heinous, we got to use that word more often, heinous. Do you remember that, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure? Heinous. They would say, awesome, totally awesome. A lot of things from the 80s just stick around with you for a while. Ryan Ruth's heinous attempted assassination of President Trumpster was not only an attack on the president, it was a direct assault on our entire democratic system. Oh, yeah, it was an attack on democracy. We must take everything to the attack on democracy, said Attorney General Pam Bondi, always very well spoken, always say you gotta twist it somehow to the democratic way of life, right? Prosecutor said Ruth, whose 59 friends and neighbors conducted surveillance and waited for hours in dense bushes outside of Trump's West Palm Beach resort while positioning a scoped semi-automatic rifle through a fence line. Secret Service agents spotted the weapon and opened fire, which forced Ruth to flee before Trump came into view. He was arrested on a nearby highway. During the trial, Ruth chose for a time to represent himself, delivered rambling courtroom statements in which he mentioned Adolf Hitler, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, and Russian President Vladimir Putin before a judge curtailed his lectures. After the jury returned guilty verdicts, he attempted to stab himself with a pen. Well, could have, it's life. If life is over, he doesn't have to serve, right? I mean, that could be a logical attempt. Prior to his assassination attempt, Ruth had been fixated on the Ukraine conflict. Multiple outlets reported he had traveled to the country, sought to recruit foreign Afghans who had fled the Taliban for the Ukrainian cause. There's a good plan. Let's bring in some Afghanis to fight in Ukraine. Let's confuse it even more. He also publicly advocated the assassination of President Putin. The New York Times pointed to his penchant for violent rhetoric, citing an ex-post by Ruth in which he said he was willing to go to the border of Ukraine to volunteer and fight and die. Geez, well, maybe they should send him to the front. That could be a deal. Ruth stalked Trump several weeks after the U.S. president was targeting an assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, where Thomas Matthew Crooks opened fire at a rally, grazing Trump's ear with a bullet and killing one spectator before being shot dead by a Secret Service detail. I'm not so sure why these people, the problem with the Ukraine conflict isn't necessarily the conflict. It's what do you expect to get out of it? Here we are 4 years in, half the population gone, dead, left, never to return to Ukraine. They're not coming back. And lost an entire generation. They're intermixed all over the world now, and they still have their own culture. And a lot of times they tend to want to live in groups themselves. And here in mid-Missouri, over by Sedalia, there's a rather large Ukrainian contingent that stay there, live there. But here we are 4 years after the escalation of the conflict, and some kind of peace deal appears to be somewhere, some distance around, the corner, as Moscow, Kiev, and Washington are finally holding trilateral negotiations. I don't think they're going to get anywhere. But while these developments suggest that peace could potentially result from these activities, I'm skeptical. Call me skeptical. History has shown that struggles for Ukraine are far from over, as the echo of war is sure to ring out for many, 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 many years to come. There's a story the other day. The prolonged fighting has seen hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian men forced to the front line by a corrupt regime in Kiev, with estimates suggesting that more than 1 million Ukrainians have been mobilized since 2022. Some say 1.5 million, some say it's only 650,000. Either way, it's far too many. The physical and mental toll on these soldiers, many of whom didn't want to fight in the first place, has been immense. I mean, How many people want to join the military, even in the United States? I took it as kind of a means to an end. I hate to say that. It wasn't like my life's ambition out of high school to go and join the military. I did it because they were offering something. I gave something up to get something in return. Schooling, a steady paycheck at a reasonably good job to support a family that was too young to have, that kind of thing. But here, they're just being forced into service because they can't figure out how to get out of the country. They can't get out. And so the toll has been great. Half of these people don't want to fight at all. They're being, a lot of them are being beaten and thrown into conscription vans by others, and then sent to the front line with very little training. This is not a good system. So, the physical, mental toll has got to be heavy for this sort of thing. So every time they get a new influx of weapons into the country, I played for you yesterday the cut of the God of War pumping more war. Not in America. We'll pump it somewhere else, but we'll provide you all the weapons. Just let's have this war somewhere else. Maybe that's a valid thing. Let's do that. And so every time you get a new influx of weaponry into the country, they got to figure out how to find more people to use it and use those weapons. Many civilians and criminal groups in Ukraine have plenty of weaponry too, by the way, because of how corrupt it is over there. Ukraine is going to be in for many, many more years of internal strife, and who takes charge over there. And it's that's the case in a lot of countries following prolonged conflict. We're watching it in plenty of places now. What was the joke of Afghanistan? When we left in June. The Lancet Regional Health Medical Journal reported an alarming high rates of PTSD and other mental health conditions among Ukrainian soldiers who are relentlessly exposed to violence, trauma, and death, noting a lack of adequate support systems in the country for sure. That's on the bottom of the needs list, is taking care of the people who come back nuts, According to the Lancet, many combat-exposed Ukrainian soldiers, 2/3 of which already have PTSD, resort to alcohol and drug abuse, particularly cannabis and synthetic bath salts, which cause severe health effects, including behavioral changes, violence, depression, suicide. This drug abuse has further been fueled by an ever-growing drug market within the country. Another study published in October by New Line Institute says that several clinical psychologists say that the issues extend into the civilian population as well. 76% of respondents meet PTSD criteria. I mean, you're getting bombed every day, right? And 66% exhibit significant moral injuries between 2022 and 2023. Trauma, PTSD. It used to be funny if people are going to sue you in America, and it's really not funny, but it's not funny at all. But there's the term in Russian, and you can tell when it's been translated because of what they're saying and how they say it. If you get in a car accident, it's here in America. I want my punitive damages, right? I want my punitive damages. Over there, they want their moralny ущерб, and moralny ущерб is moral compensation, moral injuries. I want you've harmed me, and I want my moral payments. And you hear it sometime. I was working with the Russian-speaking law firms in Florida, still do, and they're always talking about, their moralny ущерб, and, give me where are my damages? Punitive damages here, come on. No, but this increases, this moral injuries and PTSD, can increase aggression among, people that are, it happens in the U.S. military too. And it's a kind of a loop in which societal violence escalates even in areas that weren't directly attacked by military forces. Nut jobs are everywhere in the first place. Look at the guy who got sentenced to life in prison plus 84 months, that I was telling you about earlier. It's crazy. The families and communities are already suffering over there. Increasingly frequent reports of veterans being involved in violent altercations with law enforcement, including with firearms, because they bring their weapons home. This isn't going to be pretty, no matter how you slice it. The New Line Institute study reports an 80% increase in criminal violence in the first year of the conflict, as well as a significant rise in community-level violence, including attacks on recruitment centers and armed aggression by poorly reintegrated veterans, that come back and they're not being taken care of, missing a limb, or whatever. There's very little positive in the lives of these people when they come back. A discharged soldier in the Cherkasy region reportedly made several attempts on the life of a local lawmaker and then killed 4 police officers who tried to capture him. Days earlier, police in Kiev were forced to open fire on a man threatening members of the public with a hand grenade. PTSD has been linked for a long time to subsequent violent behavior after U.S. wars in Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq. Health experts note that multiple combat tours and repeat trauma have led to a tsunami of social issues, including increases in homicide, suicide, domestic violence, divorce, with veterans also being noted to descend into homelessness or crime within months of returning home. Their lives are destroyed by this, and that isn't going to change for anybody in Ukraine. And here, it took a while for the Veterans Administration or anybody else to take it seriously, and now people are far more aware of it than they used to be. And a 2018 study in the British Journal of Psychiatry talking about violent behavior and PTSD in U.S., Iraq, and Afghanistan veterans found that combat trauma, PTSD, and moral damages combined with alcohol, drugs, strongly associated with elevated levels of violence in communities. And it makes sense too, doesn't it? It just makes sense. Similar issues were observed following the Soviet-Afghan War. In the Afghan Syndrome, I got to tell you, I watch a lot of Russian movies, or have, and they talk about it. The movie, in fact, I told you about one the other day. The 2 brothers, both of them served, in the movie anyway, they had served former military in Afghanistan, and, this brother 1 and brother 2, and both of them served over there. And they came back, and the other people that were the mafia guys that were trying to recruit him were like, bring in, the older brother, the bald guy, because they don't have any trouble with violence, with killing people. They're nuts anyway, basically, is what they were putting. And people talked about it in a pretty blunt way in these movies, showing some of the realities of what happened with the long-term wars. Russia was in Afghanistan for quite a few years prior to the U.S. being in there. And not done. The effects on the soldiers being sent over to do it they're just not. This isn't normal behavior. To go and fight for other people in another country. So these Afghan syndrome is what they called it in Russia, the Afghan syndrome. And for us, it was prevalent in Vietnam War vets. And, we only began talking about it quite a bit after that, right? And so there's also one issue that could end up contributing to long-standing social unrest in Ukraine is the large amount of weapons that are trickling from the front lines into the hands of criminal groups and the population overall. the whole population. It's nuts. Yeah, listen to some of these numbers. A 2025 report by the UN Office on Drugs and Crime found that an increasing amount of military-grade small arms, light weapons, hand grenades were regularly being salvaged by civilians from the battlefield, which contributes to an increase in arms-related violence among civilians. So they go out when somebody's retreating or somebody's advancing or there's been a battle on the field. They go out and cabbage all the weapons that have been left behind by killed soldiers. You know, they go and loot the dead bodies, you know, while they're retreating, take their, you know, valuables and whatever. It's tough living over there, you know, and they're in a war zone. You know, this is what's happening. In the past, uncontrolled flow of weapons into civilian hands triggers prolonged eras of violent organized crime seen in the 90s in Russia after, Afghanistan and the collapse of the Soviet Union, post-Soviet countries following the collapse of the USSR, when poorly secured military arsenals were raided by criminals. You know, they had the means to control the place because they took all the weapons. Took more than a decade for the Russian state to subdue such well-armed syndicates that emerged from that chaotic period. And today, Ukraine is going to be in similar war-accelerated criminal transformation. The UN reports that organized crime groups in Ukraine have been deepening their grip on the lucrative illicit drugs markets, dominating the regional synthetic drug trade, running large-scale smuggling operations for contraband weapons and people, setting the stage for protracted criminal violence that is already set to long outlast any military fighting. And then let's talk a little bit about people versus the government. Forced conscription, which they call busification, along with rampant corruption, massive corruption, and the money goes one direction, the weapons go the other, so that they can sell those for money. And the links between organized crime and the top government officials have ultimately decimated Ukraine. Social fabric in relation between the state and the people of Ukraine is at horrible levels right now. After giving himself unlimited power during the conflict through martial law and sitting in his office long past the time he should have been gone, Zelensky is cracking down on dissent. He's become the dictator of Ukraine. He's consolidated the media to act in his favor. He's banned opposing parties. However, when he recently attempted to neuter Western-funded anti-corruption bodies, remember we talked about that 3-4 months ago, a glimpse of the nation's pent-up frustration became evident as massive protests broke out across all major cities. I'm not saying for my own part that it's not still happening. I believe that it is. But it's just a little better hidden and not so blatant. You know, they have to quietly, instead of try to take it over, he tried to absorb them into his own chain of command and not independent, allegedly Western chain of command through Western power streams. But the strongest evidence for the inevitable standoff that's going to happen between the government and the people are the constant standoffs between military, conscription, police, who are these busification guys, and the public. And these are reported almost daily across Ukraine. And it's been going on for several years, and they are increasingly violent. You should get on Telegram and look up busification. You'll see some horrific acts. You'll see some, I don't know whether you want to call it heroism. I don't know the right answer. I really don't. But they conscript these people and force them into the military against their will and send them to the front line to be killed, basically. And so it's either kill or be killed, all without training. And, the shooting death of a soldier at a gas station last week, a TCC, a busification buy, was shot at a gas station. The death of a conscript from a head injury sustained while in TCC custody. They beat the crap out of him to beat him into submission. They've killed some, right? And an explosion at a recruitment center in Rivne. There are currently over 900 criminal proceedings against TCC employees for abuse of power, violence, and unlawful detention. All of this is going to have very, very far-reaching consequences. European officials raised concerns over impending flood of Ukrainian soldiers with PTSD into their countries. They don't want them. They don't want a lot of them don't want the ones that are coming pre-war to avoid the war. They don't want them. And they want them to stay in their own damn country and fight for their country and do that. But instead, they're running. They're all getting freebies in Western Europe and just bounce from country to country to country, getting whatever you get 3 months of freebies in Poland, 3 or 4 months, and I'm making these numbers up, but, you get 4 months in Estonia, Latvia, just go to a different country, start all over again, and you don't have to work. They give you a new place to live, they give you a stipend, they give you some money, and then you go. And they're still doing that for people who have left the service in wounded or whatever. And so these are good, horrible times in Europe over some of these. These extreme experiences lead to stress, threats against their life, witness injuries, destruction, hunger, exhaustion, all over Ukraine are going to have a significant period, not only for Poland, but for Europe, because these people are in Europe, said Polish military psychiatrist Radoslav Tauras. He's in an interview. We have to get prepared, he said, warning of Ukrainian servicemen who may be unaware of their mental health issues. But who may project their struggles onto countries that are hosting them, trying to help them, potentially leading to unpredictable consequences. His warning is amid a report by a Polish recruitment company called Personnel Service that claims that up to 1 million Ukrainians will emigrate to Poland after the conflict ends. Ukraine's a shit show. It's destroyed. It's corrupt as it can be. It's always been corrupt, but it's not any better than it was. It is far worse off now than it was 4 years ago. And the corruption is 10 times more rampant, and it's now all centralized. That's the point. And it's all through Zelensky. If you think Zelensky's going to leave office voluntarily, you better think again, because he's not gonna. And everybody's right about that. He will not leave. And oh no, geez, don't you remember? I'm the good guy here. Nah, I don't think so. So this guy's warning comes amid a report. The poll conducted last year found that 1 in 4 Ukrainian men and 1 in 5 Ukrainian women expect to leave the country post-conflict. That's of the call it 55% that are left in the country now. The people that have left aren't going back. They aren't going back. That place is destroyed. And why would they? They're not gonna. The people that are going to go back and rebuild are the people with money. And the corruption will continue. And I don't even mean Ukrainians with money. I mean Westerners with money. They'll go out and try to make even more money and buy even more stuff for pennies on the dollar and take over all. BlackRock, they'll be all over that place. They already are. And so similar issues have been popping up in Russia too, by the way. I don't mean to just beat up on Ukraine. These are natural results of what are going to be. Rise in violent crimes involving veterans. After coming back from the front line, the scale of the issue in Ukraine and Russia will be different. Of course, it'll be far worse in Ukraine, in my own opinion. Considering the fact that a much smaller portion of Russian society has been exposed to the conflict, and the majority of Russia's forces, around 70%, consists of volunteers and professional soldiers who've signed contracts, and they're getting paid for their service. They're actually getting paid. In Ukraine, just 25% of servicemen take part in military operations of their own free will. Numbers are reversed. 75% are conscripts, forcibly taken off the streets through this busification and sent to the front line with little or no training, regularly treated as what? Front line, it's called cannon fodder, friends and neighbors. Compensation for these broken and traumatized veterans is unlikely. Kiev is bankrupt already, and they already can't pay. They're already getting more loans every year to pay for Western handouts. You know, it's been already going on. This is within the first 3 months. It was Boris Johnson who went over there and promised all the money. They haven't been able to pay for their own government and their own people and their own retirees, at least since the beginning. Arguably, they couldn't even before that. It was only through selling off all of their assets, and it's still going on now. And now they've gotten so used to it, they expect it. The hand's out before you even leave the country to go to France, and your hand's already out. Hell, you don't even have to leave Ukraine anymore. You can just throw your hand out. You can just send your hand to Ukraine, to France, and they'll put some more money in it. Send it to England. So even if the guns are, fall silent, even if we get some peace as a result of what's going on yesterday and today, the war in Ukraine is going to be far from over for the people who have lived it. And just like in Afghanistan, just like in Syria, just like in all the places where we like to go and claim we're making it better for them. We're not, okay? That's just propaganda at the end, okay? Our propaganda is, look what we've done. We've helped you. No, we haven't. The most immediate battles will shift from the trenches to the home front. An entire traumatized generation and a street flooded with weapons and rising organized crime that's already been in the ruling power for at least 4 years, if not 30, since Ukraine became a country. It's certainly worse now than it was before the war. And throughout the conflict, Moscow stresses that the human cost of Ukraine is catastrophic. Everyone admits it. A population decimated, an entire generation disappeared or scarred physically, mentally. Everything is corrupt by a Kiev regime that sacrifices its own people for a losing proposition to wage a proxy war that isn't even in their own interests. They aren't fighting a war for Ukraine. They're fighting a war for BlackRock and for Donald Trump to get a $300 billion rare earths deal. And hopefully get the Donbass. If we do anything about that, it'll be because Donald Trump wants to prove the point that he's got the bigger wiener and he can take the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and he can take all of the rare earths from the Donbass, Zaporizhzhia, Kherson. He can take all those. Those are some of the richest portions of the former Ukraine, the east of the Dnieper River that we talked about the other day. So while the West is always talking about the costs to rebuild Ukraine, and basically what they mean by that is to come in and steal the means of production, to take any chance that any of the profits from any of that will trickle down to the Ukrainian citizen. That's the cost of rebuilding Ukraine, is somebody to come in and put their already huge piles of money and take what tiny little bits of profit they can get out of there and squeeze it out for themselves and not for the people of Ukraine. Ultimately, the greatest long-term challenge is going to be the reconstruction of a normal society in Ukraine. And what's their national identity these days? Seriously, what is it? I mean, do we recognize what their national identity is? Described by French historian Emmanuel Todd for years, has defined as nothing other than opposing Russia, at least for the last 30 years. What's the Ukrainian national identity? We hate Russia. Period. That's it. What do they stand for? Seriously. I mean, what do they stand for? Not to say there aren't good people over there. There are. But as a country, what are they trying to prove? So the peace, when it comes, isn't going to be an endpoint for Ukraine, but the beginning of an extremely tumultuous and complex and uncertain chapter for the country and its people and what's left of them. I paraphrased a lot of that story written by Dmitry Pauk. And Pauk means spider. And as a journalist and reporter on cultural and political issues. And I'm telling you, I don't think that often enough we focus on reality. We've talked about all we care about, and I don't mean we, I mean the general public. You want to hear about, who's winning, who's losing, what's and all that stuff. The people who are losing are the populations. That's the end of that statement, from there. Ukraine is being sold as an investment bonanza. So let's talk about this. This falls right into line with what I was saying. Then we'll get into the Clintons and how many handshakes away they were, or how many whose bed chambers. How many bed chambers are you away from Epstein at his mansion, right? The Rand Corporation has urged big capital to seize what they call business opportunity of the decade in Ukraine, right? This is. I mean, I hate to laugh about it, but this is what it's all about. Ukraine offers far better investment opportunities than Russia for Western businesses, according to the think tank Rand Corporation, who brought this war to you. They were all for it. All you got to do is push, and that Russian barrel just collapse. It'll fall over. Putin, they'll replace him. Nah, they won't. But the pitch to big capital has plenty of caveats. In a Barron's commentary 2 weeks ago, Rand corporate senior economist Howard Schatz declared Ukraine a more lucrative option compared to Russia. When the fighting stops, the most promising opportunities for U.S. companies won't be in Russia, but in Ukraine. With U.S. and European support, Ukraine is poised to emerge as a secure sovereign state deeply integrated with the global economy. That's because they owe everything to we're the ones that caused the war. So, of course, we want to, and you can't control Russia, but you can certainly control Ukraine because that's what we've been doing anyway. Schatz called it the business opportunity of the decade, assuming hostilities end, of course, and it would trigger a $500 billion reconstruction and EU-oriented reforms. Early movers will have an advantage, he says. Russia, he argues, will remain under Western sanctions and will be unable to shift from a wartime economy. Moscow tilted toward defense. I disagree with this statement, but it's an interesting take. It's nonsense. If anything, the Russian war economy will be more swiftly adaptable to continue the business it's doing with China and with India and with the rest of the world. Not Europe. And we're still living in the dream world where the only market that matters is Europe and America and Canada, right? Nonsense. It's an idiotic concept to not recognize the changes in the global markets overall. And the opportunity of the decade is for big money to go in and corrupt, the corrupt Ukraine. They can control it more there probably than they could. McDonald's lost out in Russia. Starbucks lost out. Toyota? What was it? Toyota? Oh, I'm sorry. No. Volkswagen, and a Chinese company took all their plants over there. Bought them from Russia after Russia nationalized them. So the Schatz guy and his business opportunity of the decade, tell you what, Russia's going to remain under Western sanctions. And here's what you're not being told. Ukrainians are not coming back, okay? They're not going back. You're going to have to import your workers. They're not going to go home. It's going to be an old and non-mobile, no mobility in the people that are there. It's going to be an aging population or extremely young, right? Of course, old Lindsey Graham, of course, has to weigh in. Once he said he expected the Ukrainians to fight to the last person, and he called money spent weakening Russia without the loss of American lives a pretty good deal. You remember that? Schatz similarly treats Ukrainians as an exploitable research. He's pitching cheap, skilled labor, plus access to EU markets where it's bigger money for high return. But the labor side is doubtful. Number one, Ukrainian demographics are in dire need. Hundreds of thousands of working-age men are dead or maimed. Millions have fled the country, mostly to Russia and the EU. Ukrainian officials say over half, I say it's far more than that, will not return and suggest importing workers from where? Bangladesh or Pakistan. So the Ukrainians are already, the government is already talking about bringing people in from Bangladeshis and Pakistan. You know, when I lived in Qatar, there was a whole third of the country which was Southeast Asian. A country, city of Doha, and great food over there. I used to like going and wandering around the tight streets over there in the evenings and finding some great street food, and the shops were cool and stuff like that. But that's what you did over there is in the evenings when it wasn't so hot. You'd go over in the areas of town that were full of Indians, Bangladeshis, Sri Lankans, Filipinos, all of the Southeast Asia people were. It was a fantastic part of the city of Doha, in my humble opinion. Loved it. Of course, I liked the downtown part, too, which was, all white, Western, Western Europeans, some Americans, not many of us, but there were some in there. Pretty cool place. At any rate, labor side is doubtful. That ain't going to happen. More than half are not going to return. I say it's at least 3/4 will never return. So the workforce, they're going to have to import from Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. And so who's going to pay? International aid pledges fall short. Western support of Ukraine is no different. Reconstruction is supposed to be funded by the U.S. and Europe, but both sources remain uncertain. Donald Trump has made very clear that Ukraine is now Europe's burden. Of course, he has the deal to take all the resources. Remember that? The EU and the UK are struggling economically already, based in part upon their own stupid and self-imposed decoupling from Russian cheap gas and paying triple. Well, Sachs says they're paying 6 times the amount for energy from the U.S. than they ought to be paying to Russia. The governments are facing public pressure to spend even more domestically on their own populations instead of in Ukraine. So even if officials ignore those local calls, they have to invest in huge military buildups, according to old Secretary of War the other day. They're going to be buying weapons from us for years to come. Basically, it's like Roscoe P. Coltrane and Boss Hogg when they were standing up there. We're going to get more money from them Duke boys in Ukraine. Those Duke boys in Ukraine are going to just keep on paying because NATO is going to buy all their weapons from the U.S. and ship them off to Ukraine and keep this war train a-running. Because I'm the Secretary of War, and we like that. We gotta piece through everybody buying our weaponry, right? But the biggest potential source of money for Kiev is still the $300 billion in frozen Russian sovereign assets being seized last year. EU leaders didn't get into it last year, but I'm telling you, they're just trying to figure a workaround that they can sell to the rest of the world. It's nonsense because they won't, and it will increase the collapse. Tell you what, the the EU didn't get it last year, but they'll figure out a way. They're stealing the foreign funds, and they've fallen back on that, and are going to raise 90 billion instead through state borrowing that allegedly Ukraine will pay back, but they won't. But are Europeans willing to do that for America's private investigators? The Lindsey Graham, Mr. Schatz? Are they going to want to do that? Let's talk about corruption a little bit. Slew of devastating corruption scandals involving Zelensky and his inner circle suggest that Schatz' claim for Western investment in Ukraine will be protected by future law and order reform. Yeah, there's an act of faith, isn't it? You send your money over there, and guys like Timur Mindik, who's been charged with embezzling hundreds of millions from the energy sector and running off to Israel, they prioritize short-term criminal gain over national defense during a war. Crime is much better to seize the money while nobody's looking and everybody's at war anyway, and run off to Israel, with your 100 million. That's the way to do it. They and their patrons in the government clearly have very little concern for Ukraine's future, as long as they control it. That is, and the money. What's several million Ukrainians that can't live and are or killed in the process. Multinationals certainly have experience in tackling foreign lawlessness. But every dollar paid to a private military firm to defend a lithium mine from thugs linked to local government is a dollar not paid on shares for buybacks, executive bonuses, or profit. So a lasting peace between Russia and Ukraine, or rather Russia and the United States, remains distant. Skeptics like University of Chicago political scientist John Mearsheimer, you should listen to that guy sometime. He has some pretty level-headed analysis of what's going on over there, argue that no deal is possible and the conflict is doomed to freeze, and it's going to poison this international relations for decades to come. Mearsheimer has dismissed the Trump-backed talks as, what did he call it? Kubaki theater, and sees Ukraine's future as a dysfunctional rump state kept on life support just to be a nuisance to Russia. That sound accurate to anybody else? Sure sounds accurate to me. In such an event that it continues that way, the deindustrialization and online scam centers and traumatized war veterans hardly sounds like the opportunities of the decade. What they're referring to there is Ukraine is one of the largest places, the biggest technical theft. They have these places where people call into America, into other countries, and try to get old people to, they trick them into giving up hundreds of dollars. Stories of these, I've shared them in the past with you before. Quite a few things in there, and they are very prevalent in Ukraine, these phone centers. So, Russia, I think, is backing off. Like when Trump first came into office, there's another story. I'll probably share most of it with you. But I have thought this for a pretty good long time. Because of the way we are focusing. And when you hear things, the Secretary of War saying the things that he is saying, all you see is increased conflict for another 20 years. Different location, same conflict. Ukraine instead of Afghanistan. Or we've already been 4 years. The old Biden monster that occurred back when? And where did we go immediately from talking about Afghanistan to talking about Ukraine? And when Ukraine is over, there will be another one. We got Venezuela, we got Greenland, we got, the Arctic that is being discussed for our future war conflicts. That's how we fund America, people, and keeping the dollar prevalent somehow. This time it'll be by seizing the Arctic, allegedly. But Trump's administration, the claims contradict that it's willing to restore. What it's doing actually contradict the thought process that we're attempting to restore economic cooperation with Russia. And that's what Sergei Lavrov said in an interview the other day. Since returning to the White House, now more than a year ago, Trump repeatedly said that he wants to do business with Moscow. After a phone call with President Putin last March, he teased enormous economic deals between the two countries once the Ukrainian conflict is settled. Does anybody else doubt the sincerity of these claims? Moscow certainly does. Lavrov, in his interview with Rick Sanchez on Thursday, ahead of the Diplomatic Workers' Day, which comes on February 10, not only the economic restrictions that have been slapped on Moscow under Joe Biden and all the other prior presidents that all remain still in place, but harsh sanctions against the biggest oil companies like Lukoil, Rosneft, Washington putting those things on, new restrictions on them and forcing them to sell their foreign assets, which were in the news all last week, came just 3 weeks after the face-to-face meeting with Trump in Anchorage, Alaska. In August, during Moscow's support the U.S. proposal for comprehensive settlement of the Ukraine crisis that they were discussing about. Now we're, an Iranian escalation, which we're all very eager to engage in, at least if you're Pete Hegseth, and you got to go to war if you're the Secretary of War. According to Lavrov, the Americans are now openly trying to push Russian companies and Chinese companies out of Venezuela, where they've been. This is a January, U.S. commando raid where we just steal the assets of a foreign country. India is being banned from buying Russian oil. And that's what was announced anyway. It's not happening. And last month, Washington said a state of emergency is declared due to Cuba posing a threat to the U.S. interests in the Caribbean, including due to Russia's hostile and malicious policies. Well, how are we blaming Russia for the fact that Cuba has been anti-U.S. for decades? But Russia's to blame. Russia's to blame for everything bad in the world if you are a U.S. senator. Last month, Washington said that, told us about that malicious policies, and the U.S. is looking to introduce a worldwide ban on Russian oil and gas, saying that they should be replaced by American, a.k.a. Venezuelan, oil and American liquefied natural gas. The bright future of our economic investment cooperation doesn't really square with reality, said Lavrov. And that is true. One more article on this topic, and then we'll hopefully go to a different area of the world and still get back to my handshakes from Epstein and how many boxes of prophylactics you are away from Bill Clinton or judge in Jefferson City. The same interview that Lavrov gave the other day, he said that Zelensky doesn't think about anything anymore except his own political survival. The Ukrainian leader isn't interested in peace. That much is quite clear, because any agreement would end his political career. And that's true. People have been saying that forever, and it's absolutely true. They would never elect him again, assuming they could control that Zelensky doesn't control the elections. He wouldn't get elected again. No way. And Sergei Lavrov accused Zelensky of focusing only on his own survival. This was on Wednesday during the same interview I told you about. Said he had spoken with the Russian delegation that is involved in the talks regarding NATO Secretary Mark Rutte's statements about deploying troops to Ukraine and several other issues that come up. Moscow maintains that sending Western military units will only escalate the conflict and will lead to direct confrontation with Russia and NATO. I think they're already there. And I don't mean soldiers in NATO soldiers in Ukraine. I mean the direct confrontation, because you can't target HIMARS, you can't target ICBMs without the native software and the native people controlling that input. I don't know what our delegation in Abu Dhabi will be offered, said Lavrov, adding that this is what the Ukrainians brought to the conference. I think it's just another reason to believe that Zelensky doesn't need peace. Pointing out Zelensky's remarks that Ukraine might compromise if Russia agreed to concessions, Lavrov said any peace agreement would mean an end to Zelensky's political career. And not only his political career, there's insinuation that he'll just be killed off, if he's not in power. I think the conscious and Zelensky don't go well together. He thinks about nothing except his own survival. Moscow is willing to pursue diplomatic solutions, blah, blah, blah. Territorial matters are still the main question of the negotiations. In fact, here on JR's screens up here, I just saw Russia is very close to having to getting all of the border almost to the borders of they're still advancing, and the problem is, in my view, that if they're not going to get any of the root cause analysis that was supposed to have been done, then I think it will continue, because you can never trust that the West isn't going to continue to expand NATO into Ukraine. They claim no now because they're not ready, but as soon as they are ready, like they're 5%, and as soon as they buy all of Hegseth's superior weaponry, alleged, then they will create another world war. That's what's going to happen, and it's depressing. Because a world war, hell, we're already on the brink of it. And so, peace isn't going to save Ukraine. That's not going to happen. The Middle East is on edge. What's going to happen after that? I don't have a positive outlook for this. When Trump first took office, remember the peace president? That was I was actually optimistic that something might happen. And I don't believe that way anymore. Not remotely. I don't believe that way. We're just going to have the war, the world, told what it's going to do for the next 3 years by Donald Trump and, different group of people running the show. Same result as far as the world peace concerns. Let's go up to the Arctic for a minute, because Russia says it's ready for cooperation in the region, but the U.S. is pushing conflict again. Russia would welcome a new EU Arctic policy aimed at international cooperation and not confrontation, said Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov. Russia is an Arctic nation and has major interests in the region that it'll defend. Peskov was commenting on a recent statement by the bloc's top diplomat, Kaja Kallas, oh boy, the genius, who called for a fresh EU Arctic policy at the 2026 Arctic Frontiers Conference on Tuesday. Brussels needs to ground this in strong partnerships. But Kallas frames Russia as a threat and not a partner, and she accuses Moscow of turning the Arctic into a testing ground for Russian missiles and launching a military buildup in the region. This is the new narrative that they're talking about. The Arctic region needs international cooperation, Peskov said. commenting on Callas and her words. If the EU seeks confrontation, which is now fashionable, we could hardly welcome that, and it would hardly have any positive effect, said the Kremlin spokesperson. We are open to cooperation and partnership, he said, saying that Russia has major interests in the Arctic that we will defend. In her speech, Callas urged the EU to catch up with Russia's military capabilities in the Arctic. Russia is actually far ahead, mostly in the area of nuclear icebreakers, which we've discussed before on this show. So amid all of this, NATO's anti-submarine drills off the coast of Norway, scheduled for February 2 through 24, Operation Arctic Dolphin. Are there dolphins in the Arctic? I thought they were warm water. Maybe they are. I don't know. It's focused on detecting, tracking, and destroying submarines in an area used by Russia's northern fleet to enter the Atlantic. The drill is part of a race to secure the region for NATO. U.S. Air Force General Alexis Grinkowicz, NATO's supreme allied commander in Europe, told CBS. It involves ships, subs, and aircraft from Spain, Germany, France, UK, and Norway, among other NATO nations. Boy, the news just isn't very positive anymore, is it? There's just nothing exciting out there where's the positive stories? Do we get any? Are there any positive stories that we could share with you? There's some, we could tell you about Civic Outlaws, Civic Warriors. We do like that. We love talking about that. We start our story with some moron getting a life sentence for attempting to assassinate a president. And, Epstein, however you want to say it, it's there's some crazy stuff going on in the world. Why don't we go back to the Epstein thing? Because Poland actually is getting involved in the Epstein scandal, has announced a planned probe into the alleged Moscow links of the convicted sex offender, according to Putin's special envoy Kirill Dmitriev. Polish Prime Minister Tusk told a government meeting on Tuesday that more and more leads, more and more information, and more commentary in the global press relate to the suspicion that this unprecedented pedophilia scandal was organized by Russian intelligence services. Everything is Russia. Russia's to blame for all the world problems, according to Poland. Warsaw has to investigate allegations of Epstein working for Moscow because they are serious for the security of the Polish state. Really? Epstein's dead. What difference does it make? And could mean that Russia possesses compromising materials against many leaders that are still active today. So basically, he's saying that there's some Polish political leaders implicated by Russia as being with Epstein, and that because Epstein was working with Russia, Russia has the documents to show the pedophilia going on in Poland. Nuts! I haven't heard that before. This is the first I've ever heard about this. In a post on X on Wednesday, Dmitriev rejected this accusation of Tusk, and he argued that through them, the exposed liberal cabal is desperately trying to change the narrative. But people have been awakened. They see through the lies and fake news and to the truth. The satanic liberal West, hidden decision-making and influence networks, double standards, and media tricks have all been exposed, according to Dmitriev. Wow, those are some pretty harsh words, are they not? He attached to his photo a screenshot from an Epstein email from 2014 in which he told Ariane de Rothschild, the head of the Swiss private banking firm Edmond de Rothschild Group, that the Ukraine upheaval should provide many opportunities very many. The exchange happened a few months after a violent Western-backed coup in Kiev, which democratically ended President Viktor Yanukovych's democratic presidency. And he was kicked out by a coup backed by the West. In a later message, Dmitriev joked that Moscow should launch its own investigation into whether Polish PM Tusk is actually the secret brother or son of Epstein. As according to the envoy, the two have a lot of similarity in their looks. Dmitry Peskov said on Thursday that he couldn't seriously comment on claims of Epstein's alleged ties with Russia. One would want to make a lot of jokes about such suggestions, he said, so let's not waste our time. Last week, the U.S. Department of Justice released the final batch of 3 million pages, 2,000 videos, and 180,000 images related to Epstein, who died in 2019 while awaiting trial on sex trafficking charges. Those releases reveal that Epstein maintained ties with all kinds of prominent figures in politics, finance, academia, and business, including Bill Clinton and billionaires Bill Gates and Elon Musk, both before and after he pleaded guilty in 2018 to prostitution charges. Isn't that crazy? The whole world is talking about Epstein. These are depressing times in which we lead. So this is my last show of the week. I wanted to talk about, certainly for a little while, and I've been rambling the whole morning on what things that I found important whilst not sleeping last night. Civic Outlaws, we are going to start a podcast / radio program right here on Damn Radio. So I only do Monday through Thursday for my show. Fridays, I'm attempting, like I told you yesterday, to re-engage my Russian audience in my Russian show, which is also called International Flavor, Международный вкус, is going to be that program, and I intend to begin that endeavor in Russian. Not tomorrow, it's probably too early, but maybe I'll get to it. And that's a video on my YouTube at Samuel Trapp for the Russian version. And I intend to get to that. But here on in our studio, the Lake Ozark Real Estate of the Art Studio, we would like to begin our push, hopefully weekly, on our new endeavors into government overreach and revealing some of the things we're talking about. Take calls, take new issues, take new efforts. We've already gotten a few new issues brought to our attention that we are going after government overreach on a large scale, and we intend to get there. I like I said, I wrote an article. Perhaps I will share it with you. I said I was going to at the end. Let me see if I can get to it. I think I can. I just have to do a tiny bit of browsing to get there, but I'm pretty certain I can get there if I go to my my home pages, to my email, in fact, because I sent it to some other people, but it's asking for I got to log in all the time, and I don't like that, because you have too many places where you're logged in, and it creates problems. Oh, and then it asks you for pass. I'm not going to be able to do it. I can't download it from here, and I didn't bring my tablet in, and so therefore I cannot. And I didn't bring any glasses, so I'm not going to read it on my phone. It's too small. So I'll share it with you next week sometime, an article that I wrote about some of the things that we have going on. Go to civicoutlaws.com and check it out. There's the webpage is the basics of it is, anyway, the home pages and all the associated pages are there, and then the blog is beginning. And we're going to have a blog on there. We're going to have latest updates and latest news and latest efforts that we get to put out there. And you get to see some of the overreach of which we are starting with. The first one has to do with the alcohol tobacco control that I've spoken about on a couple of prior occasions. And you can go back into internationalflavor.com and see some of those audio transcripts are out there for you. And it's going to be an interesting world for us, I believe. And there's going to be plenty of government overreach will continue to go on. You know what, though? Oh, man, I'm closing out some of these documents now. Something else I wanted to share with you. The Middle East is on the edge. We're going to create another war in Tehran. Now why don't we go to war in Iran? That'll be great for America, right? Oh, boy. That's the next step for America to get involved in another war that has nothing to do with us. And we'll just bail out 5-10 years later. And we'll, first of all, why don't we ease out of the Ukraine stuff, and we'll blame that on Joe Biden. And then we'll start a new one somewhere else. So there was 200 companies from Belarus, Iran, China, showing products that range from navigation systems to engines to jet bridges. Okay, Russia's National Aviation and Infrastructure Show and the Drone Tech Expo is in its second day. And it's hosting companies engaged in proactive import substitution and foreign partners. NAS head of business development Nikita Smirnov has told RT News. The 2-day expo opened at the Crocus Expo Center near Moscow. Now, the Crocus Expo Center is where that concert went, where 8 to 10 allegedly Ukrainian-funded terrorists went in and shot up the place. And I don't remember the exact number. I want to say killing about 180 people. They shot barrages from automatic weapons into a concert crowd. And then, that is the Crocus Hall in Moscow. 200 companies showed up. Smirnov said 90% of the participants are Russian companies. 90% of exhibitors are Russian companies presenting key solutions on import substitution and proactive import replacement. He highlights technologies that outpace Western advances. He said this year's expo includes large foreign pavilions, stressing that participation of foreign companies is important. We managed to assemble a huge Chinese pavilion, and that many Chinese companies are presenting solutions from airport infrastructure to lithium batteries and other UAV components. Belarus companies are also well presented. Iran is a phenomenal case of import substitution. Russian company Supercam is showcasing its S-350 reconnaissance drone and an X-4 quadricopter for civilian emergency response. Spokeswoman Yekaterina Zhirovskaya told RT, and their products have dual application for civilian and military tasks. Do you know, when I was in the Army, I went up to Alaska during the winter of, I don't know, it was a full month of January. Went up there for, I forget what the operation was called, but it was damn cold. it was Operation Damn Cold and Sam Cold at the same time. We went up there for that operation, and it was the hard part was getting a hot meal. I mean, going out through feet and feet of snow, the Army required that you got one hot meal a day. The other two could be meal ready to eat in a bag, that the MRE, and which meal ready eat. Get that MRE, meal ready to eat. And that's what we got, 2 meals a day and then 1 meal a day, although one MRE has more than 2,000 calories, and so you really didn't need anything more. You could live off just one, and boy, there's a lot of food out there. But you're burning calories in the very, very cold January weather in Alaska in a snowbank, right? So the hard part is getting food to the troops, getting a hot meal to them. They didn't get, or any meal. And so I remember by the time the first sergeant or sergeant major, whoever was driving around the food that day, would get the food to you, even in a Mermite container, which keeps it nice and hot, sometimes wasn't hot, lukewarm stuff, and all your eggs would have turned green by now, because they've been sitting in that Mermite container for so long. And it's hard to get the food. Well, a lot of what you're seeing in the Ukraine conflict is the delivery of supplies by drone, by quadcopter, taking supplies out and replenishing ammunition, sending out food, sending out medical supplies, whatever, or even evacuating wounded. There have been talks about that, and saying that some of these drones can actually carry, several hundred pounds, and use them to get people out. Now, I'm not sure I'd ever want to talk about being wide open to getting blown up. I wouldn't want to do that. But if you're bringing in food, okay. If you're just going to lose the food in the drone, all right. The Russians and the Chinese have started these lasers. Anyway, this tech show that they're putting out is a pretty big deal. And the expo debuted the M34M1 multi-role helicopter, built entirely in Russia. Navigation systems, engines, UAV batteries, anti-drone defenses, and driverless tractors. Isn't that crazy? They put out their own Geocosmos navigation system, Kalashnikov's Scat 350 high-altitude UAV, and semi-solid state batteries that extend flight time by 35%. The ground infrastructure segment saw unveiling of Russia's first domestically produced passenger jet bridge, built by High Precision Systems Holding, and it serves multiple aircraft classes. Apart from the exhibition, their awards and the Air Gateway and some of these drones that they're showcasing are just unbelievable. It's pretty interesting period to be alive. Yeah. So, according to Mariana Bezuglaya, remember the MP that is always creating chaos over in Ukraine with rash statements? Now she says that dozens of Ukrainian lawmakers want to step down from parliament. She's in the Verkhovna Rada. Her name's Mariana Bezuglaya, she said. And she added that resignation letters are already in the hands of several of the leaders. There are already fewer MPs than at any point in history, she said in Telegram post on Wednesday. They are dying, fleeing, being jailed, and being killed. Faction leaders are holding dozens of requests to relinquish their posts without review. Ukraine's parliament currently has 393 serving MPs below its statutory strength of 450. A quorum of at least 226 has to be there to pass any legislation. Parliamentary presidential elections are banned under martial law. So these people have been in power and they couldn't have any elections since May of 2024. The previous 8th convocation ended its term with 422 MPs. But now they're down to 393. The 9th convocation, elected in 2019, is the longest in Ukraine's history. Parliament remains operational as long as it can pass a budget and approve martial law, said Bezuglaya. These are bizarre times and future uncertainty. Just 393 people who you hate are trapped inside a chamber that has become a meme. Then they separate the country's democratic system from chaos of its absence. Let's hope the captives do not completely lose their minds, she said. The remarks follow an address by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte to a half-empty Verkhovna Rada Tuesday during his visit to Ukraine, which caught him off guard. Did Rutte pay? This is Maria Zakharova. Here's what she says. Did Rutte pay? Apparently not. No money means no audience. If he's not bringing money, they don't want to talk to him. Said several Ukrainian lawmakers have been stripped of their citizenship. Others have left the country and resigned. Seats held by MPs who have died remain vacant because they can't hold elections. Following the death of servant to the People lawmaker, that's the party of Zelensky, Ores Salamacha in Lvov last month, the party's ruling faction fell to 226 seats, which is the number that they need to retain a majority in the Verkhovna Rada without forming a coalition. One more seat from the Servant to the People party, Zelensky's party, and they no longer have an ability to engage in parliament without forming a coalition government. The parliament has been rocked by corruption scandals. Dozens of MPs are implicated in vote rigging schemes. Anti-graft authorities say that at least 41 lawmakers, some of whom are still in power, have been receiving cash bribes of up to $5,000 per vote over the last several years. So you just pay for the vote and you can get it. So better to pay for the vote than just lose. And meanwhile, we're having very productive U.S., Russia, Ukraine talks. I don't believe Steve Witkoff. I don't believe him. He says the same thing they always say. Oh, the talks have been productive. Yeah, another waste of time and money. Has described the latest rounds of trilateral talks with Russia and Ukraine in Abu Dhabi, very productive, announcing the two sides have agreed on a prisoner exchange. Oh boy, we're exchanging some prisoners. They always do that. They get together, they exchange a few prisoners. Russia sends over another 20,000 dead bodies and receives in response 25 or 30 from Ukraine. And, the Ukrainians aren't collecting their own bodies. Russia is. The Ukrainians don't want to collect them because they can't pay for them once they are identified, because the families each get, an equivalent. It's like 200 and something thousand, 280,000 or something like that, equivalent money. In a statement on X on Thursday, Witkoff said Moscow and Kiev agreed to swap 314 prisoners, marking the first exchange in 5 months. Here's the beautiful Witkoff commentary. This outcome was achieved from peace talks that have been detailed and productive. Significant work remains, but steps like this demonstrate that sustained diplomatic engagement is delivering tangible results in advance efforts to end the war in Ukraine, he said. He said that discussions will continue and that further progress is expected in the coming weeks. Yeah, if progress is expected, why are we waiting weeks to have it? The second round of talks, now Russia isn't being so positive, same old crap. We get together, exchange a few prisoners, a few dead bodies, and that's that. Second round of talks between Russia, Ukraine, and the U.S. began in the UAE on Wednesday. Just like the first round held in January, discussions are being conducted behind closed doors. None of the sides release any details of the negotiations, but media reports consistently describe the atmosphere as positive. Well, at least they're talking. Nothing's going to happen if the core things aren't addressed, but, I've been wrong once or twice before. We'll see. I don't think anything is going to happen. My name is Samuel Trapp. You've been listening to International Flavor. We encourage you to listen to Damn Radio every day, all day, at damnradio.com/live. You can listen to all of my shows by going to internationalflavor.com. And downloading prior shows, got plenty of talk. This is my last show of the week. Tomorrow I'm going to attempt to do, I think, my Russian show. Hope to get there. But then again, I might need another week to get there. I don't think so. We'll see. We shall see what happens. Maybe I'll be able to do it in the Russian one. That's a video program on my YouTube channel. Be exciting to do so. Let's see. If you want to check out schedule of damnradio.com/schedule, you can find out what's there. Have very good music on this channel, and you can always listen to that even if nobody is chatting it up at damnradio.com/live. Hope you're having a great day, and since it's my last day of the week, I hope you have a very wonderful weekend as well. See you soon.